let's talk about the Survivor Series, and let's get your take on it. I thought it was okay. I didn't think that not much really changed as far as the landscape of the company at this event, which has happened at other events. But what was your overall take on Survivor Series 2013?
I think that's the big thing. Like you said, it wasn't bad, but nothing earth-shattering happened, and I think that's the problem. When you get the Survivor Series, which was traditionally one of the big four pay-per-views, and it was kind of it just felt like just another pay-per-view. I think that's the biggest problem with what the fans were getting out of it.
All right, so we'll go through the matches. Randy Orton and Big Show. Randy Orton, as you see on the screen there, did retain his championship. The Authority came down, did not physically interfere, but did help Randy. And then, Randy sort of gave it to them the next day on Raw, telling them that he didn't need any help. Where do you think they're going with this? Is there some sort of a face turn with some member of the Authority or Randy Orton, or why was Orton, really upset that Triple H and Stephanie helped him retain that championship against Big Show?
Yeah, it's kind of a convoluted storyline right now.
Right.
The lines between traditional, I guess, heels and babyfaces are being blurred right here, because when you watch the Authority with Stephanie and Triple H, sometimes they look like heels, sometimes they look like babyfaces, and the same with Randy Orton. So it's a confusing time. So to try to figure out where they're going with this, I think that's the idea, is to keep people guessing. But at the same time, when you don't have that clearly defined black and white, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, and who am I supposed to be cheering for, it makes it difficult for people to get kind of emotionally invested in it. And I wish I knew which direction they were going, but this has been, for me at least, anyways, one of the most confusing times that I've witnessed. Anyway,
yeah, it just seems like every week, some weeks he's buddies with Triple H, and Triple H says, he's the best in the business. Some weeks, Triple H is almost testing him, and you don't really understand what exactly they're going for. So hopefully they explain it, because sometimes in wrestling, I know I hate it when they start developing a storyline, then it just sort of drops out, and they don't have any sort of conclusion to it. So
right, exactly. Yeah, again, almost simple is best.
Yeah. John Cena, Alberto Del Rio. John Cena retains. John Cena, despite coming back very early from his injury, has looked pretty good, and will now get a big test at the next pay-per-view, TLC, when he goes up against Randy Orton. This is a long-standing rivalry renewed here. And could they possibly be unifying the world title and the WWE title? We could actually see only one champion come TLC?
Well, coming into this, at least so far, they have not used the word unification yet.
Right.
So they basically said that both titles will be hanging over the ring. So, a lot of people are speculating, will it be one of those situations where both guys climb up the ladder, each grabs,
right,
that sort of thing. So as of right now, they haven't used the word unification, but it may lead to bigger things. If it does, maybe it leads to a WrestleMania match where they could say, whoever happens to be the World Heavyweight Champion and WWE Champion at the time, at WrestleMania, we're going to have a match to determine one unified champion. If it leads in that direction, that's cool.
So Del Rio loses. I'm not really sure what's next for him after that loss. Where do you see his character going? Do you see Ricardo Rodriguez returning? He had turned babyface and was with RVD, but now RVD's out again, and we haven't seen Ricardo. What do you think's next for Del Rio? What do they do with his character?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because I'm a big fan of Del Rio's. I like his work. I think he's excellent in the ring. He's good on the mic, but for some reason just hasn't resonated with the audience. So that's the biggest detriment. Obviously, the biggest thing is to be a superstar that resonates with the audience. So I could see him moving down the ladder, so to speak, a little bit, maybe to a mid-card level for the time being, and hopefully he could rekindle some of what he had when he first came in. And Ricardo Rodriguez, I don't know how you can bring him back and partner him with Del Rio, with their history, but then again, it is professional wrestling, and of course they can make it work if it happens. But I think they were better suited together than apart.
Yeah.
And bringing them together somehow, I think, would be the best path for both. Let's say.
CM Punk and Daniel Bryan defeated Luke Harper and Eric Rowan of the Wyatt family. Some people might question why they're doing this whole best in the beard thing. I mean, Punk and Bryan are such stars individually. Both have been main event guys over the last couple of years and have been world champions. But, right now, is it simply a thing that just don't have a main event spot for Punk and Bryan? Is that why they're, teaming up and feuding with the Wyatts right now?
Yeah, and I think leading to something else down the road. I mean, obviously, you get guys like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan who, the people that they affectionately refer to as the internet wrestling community, the darlings of the internet, and so to speak. But they're still hugely popular with the casual fans as well. So you've got, two unique guys that appeal to a huge audience. And I guess it almost seems like they want to do something with Daniel Bryan versus CM Punk down the line. Now that Daniel Bryan, I guess, has been kidnapped, for lack of a better term, by the Wyatts, and maybe they kind of brainwash him into thinking that he should take on CM Punk, and that is kind of like the match that will appeal to the quote unquote wrestling purists out there. So part of the WWE is that they cater to a large audience, so they want to make those people happy as well, and I think a match between those two would definitely set a fire under those guys.
The traditional Survivor Series matches, you had Rey Mysterio come back, and obviously he's very popular with a lot of fans, teaming up with Cody, Goldust, and the Usos. But it was the Real Americans and the Shield that won the match, and I guess it was obviously a one-man show in this matchup with maybe, we'll see the Shield sort of go their separate ways at some point, with Dean Ambrose feuding with a different member, because it was obviously, Roman Reigns that made the big impact in this match with all of his spears. How did you see it?
Yeah, obviously this was a showcase for Roman Reigns, and he looked great. I mean, he looked fantastic. Obviously, when you talk to Shield, we talked about this before, Eric, and eventually they're going to all go their separate ways. It's just inevitable. And a lot of people were picking Dean Ambrose as the breakout guy, and myself included, and I still think he can be. I mean, all three of those guys have a huge upside for being top guys, being main event guys, and being able to draw fans. Roman Reigns was the question mark because he was obviously the least experienced, but he's improved by leaps and bounds, and he looks fantastic. The other two guys will get their break too, but right now it looks like Roman Reigns is the guy that they're strapping the rocket to, so to speak.
Mark Henry returned, beat Ryback. We've seen a lot of jobbing for Ryback the last couple months. Ryback and Curtis Axel both were Paul Heyman guys. Now they dropped Paul, and really they seem to lose every week. Axel losing his Intercontinental Championship, losing his rematch at Survivor Series to Big E Langston. What do you think they're doing right now? Are they just burying Axel and Ryback?
I guess you can, in a sense, bearing, but I think the Ryback experiment didn't go as planned. There was a little hiccup because last year, if we remember back to Survivor Series last year, he had, and before that, Hell in the Cell, he had to substitute for John Cena when he was injured, so he was kind of thrust into a main event picture much earlier than they had anticipated. So it kind of derailed the plans they had for him originally. And with that derailment, it kind of threw everything off the tracks. And ever since then, they haven't been able to really get back on track with Ryback. So maybe they're just kind of cutting their losses here, maybe.
Yeah. Paul Heyman, obviously they separated Heyman from these guys. What do you think's next for Paul Heyman? Rumor is obviously he'll just come back when Brock Lesnar comes back. Is that what you expect?
Pretty much that's what I expect. I like to see Brock come back, and there you go. Maybe he comes back and destroys Ryback and Curtis Axel for not living up to Paul's expectations, so to speak, and then leading down the road. I know the speculation now is having Brock versus Undertaker, and that would be a nice way to introduce Paul Heyman back, because he was with CM Punk at last year's WrestleMania when Punk took on the Undertaker. Punk failed in his attempt to end the streak, so maybe he brings Brock back to be the guy to end the streak. I mean, Paul Heyman has managed WWE champions in the past and so forth, so the one thing he hasn't done is managed anyone, because no one has been able to beat the streak. So maybe he comes back at the Rumble, wins the Rumble, and instead of taking a title shot, says, you know what, I've been WWE champion, I've been World Heavyweight champion, the one thing that I want to do is end the streak.
Yeah, makes sense. Finally, Jimmy, everyone's sort of waiting on Vince McMahon to see when he'll come back. I know he came back off camera at Survivor Series. When do you expect him to come back on camera?
Possibly at the next pay-per-view at TLC, because we may have that inconclusive, ending to the Cena-Orton match with the two titles hanging above the ring, or maybe the next night on Raw. Probably sooner rather than later, because if they're going to build up a power struggle between him and Triple H, it has to get started soon, and it should to culminate at WrestleMania, because usually the WrestleMania build is a 3-4 month process. So possibly the next pay-per-view, or maybe the Raw right after.
Do you like where the storylines are heading right now, Jimmy? What's your overall view on what's going on right now heading into TLC? Do you think things are going well, or do you think we need to sort of step it up in a couple areas and get some stuff kick-started here?
I think certain things need to be kick-started, like you said. I get it. I know that John Cena and Randy Orton are top guys with the company, but you had an opportunity with a guy like Daniel Bryan, who the fans really gravitated to, and it was one of those situations where you weren't. He wasn't pushed down everybody's throat. It was kind of an organic thing where the crowd really, really enjoyed him and really liked his performances, and the guy was performing well every night. So I think there was a missed opportunity there with Daniel Bryan, and I guess maybe their thought process was something different. I think the biggest thing now is with the lack of competition, because we know back in the days during the Monday Night Wars, everybody tried harder. And I'm not saying that they're being lazy now. It's just that I think they are more complacent with giving other things a shot and not. Tough to put it to words. I don't want to make it sound like they're being lazy with their creative process, but it's just the urgency isn't there, if that makes sense.